If you're playing Lightning Strike or a bow build or a melee build or are a new player, watch this video, please, please, please. We have a lot of people this league who are going to be starting builds like Lightning Strike, my build, for example. And if you're inexperienced or just not paying attention, you are going to get so punished. There's going to be a lot of people who are upset this league just because they don't know. But in today's video, I'm going to show you a lot of tips to getting through the campaign more easily on attack-based builds. Attack-based builds, you're going to be much more punished if you don't upgrade your gear consistently. It's also subject to bad RNG. If you get bad gem links, you don't get a 4 link, you're going to feel it so much more than on a lot of other builds. So don't get trapped. Watch this. There's a lot of good tips in it. So our first tip is to make sure that you are upgrading your gear consistently, especially your weapons. You can find decent gear on the ground, but also checking vendors for new upgrades. So let's say on my build, we're using claws or swords. Look at this. Hargan is selling us this beautiful, sparkling, elegant foil. This might be an upgrade for your build. However, you could also buy something like this. There are different bases that have different base damage, and as you go through the campaign, you get better and better bases. If you have a good loot filter, it should show you some of the better bases. You can also check on PoE Wiki. And now another thing is that in 3.25, quality is going to apply more quality to lower level items. Previously, you would need to find a whole lot of whetstones, and then if it was a white item, you'd have to apply 4, magic 10, rare 20. Whereas now, even on a low level rare item, you can use probably just 1 or 2 whetstones and get that up to maximum quality. And with the buff to quality, this is going to be so important. So use your whetstones, apply quality, and check your vendors for upgrades like this. Also, these essences, you sometimes find these monsters trapped and they drop these things called essences. These guarantee certain modifiers on your item. So for example, we have hatred, this is cold damage, anger, fire damage, wrath, lightning damage, and we also have contempt, which is going to grant us just flat physical damage. These are all great things to use on your weapons. Obviously, you may find a really good upgrade early on and you don't need to use it, but if you do, you can try it and see. Like, here we go. We got this. This is very nice. It has fire damage, cold damage, attack speed. So rare items can have 6 modifiers, 3 prefixes, 3 suffixes. Damage modifiers like cold damage, fire damage, lightning damage, physical damage are going to be prefixes, and things like attack speed, crit chance, crit multi are going to be suffixes. So we can see this hit, cold damage, fire damage, but it only has 2 prefixes, which means we have an empty prefix, which is fantastic and leads us straight into our next point, which is to use your crafting bench. Please, please, please. Crafting bench is very strong. It won't look this fancy, but when you're leveling, if you have an open prefix and a bit of currency and you got a decent item, you can do stuff like lightning damage. You can craft on flat lightning damage to attacks like this, and then put this on. Craft, and now we have even more damage than we had before. You can find these throughout the campaign, these crafting recipes. However, if you do not know the location of them, you can normally go down to the bottom. There's this undiscovered tab in your crafting bench. I have discovered everything, but if you haven't found something, it'll be listed here, and then you can hover over it and it'll say something like found in the blood aqueducts in Act 9. So you can find it like that. Make sure you're doing this. But another important tip with benching on flat damage to your gear is to prioritize doing it on jewelry. Why? Well, the reason is because when you're leveling through the campaign on an attack build, you're going to be wanting to upgrade your weapons constantly because you get better bases, which just inherently deal more damage or have better attack speed. So jewelry is going to be changed out a lot less often, and you can get really nice tiers of attack damage on your rings and your amulet for a bit of extra damage. So make sure you're using quality, using your essences, then also applying crafts to your weapons and your jewelry to get a bit of extra damage. Let's say, for example, you have an item like this with 3 prefixes and an open suffix. Well, you can't put on any flat added damage on it, but what you can do is craft on something like attack speed instead, which will increase your damage. Something like this early on is great. I wouldn't use Chaos Orbs. This level is fine, but that gives you increased damage. Now, most of the recipes for your crafting bench for damage-based things on weapons and jewelry are going to cost you Orbs of Transmutation, Orbs of Alteration for attack speed, and then higher tiers of bench crafts are going to cost you Orbs of Alchemy. You can get Orbs of Transmutation by selling unidentified items, magic, and rare items to vendors. So make sure you're picking those up, selling them, getting your shards, and getting your Orbs of Transmutation. For Orbs of Alteration, you want to sell identified magic and rare items to vendors. And if you get a stack of 20 shards, you get an Orb of Alteration. You can see the cost is 6 alterations, which is fairly hefty during the campaign. So make sure you're selling those items to vendors. And as for the benchcraft with, let's say, flat lightning damage, this is going to cost you 4 transmutes. So sell those magic and rare identified and unidentified items during the campaign. Later on, these benchcrafts will cost alchemies. These are, again, a little bit tricky to come by during the campaign, but you do find them here and there. If you find a really good piece of gear, don't feel bad crafting something like this on it with some alchemies. Now, another great tip is the tool Awakened PoE Trade, which I will link in the description. This is a perfectly legal tool, but you can use it to price check items. But more importantly, what you can do is use it to quickly check the DPS of a weapon that you may find. You might find an item on the ground and you look at it and you say, oh, I don't know if that's more damage or not. What you do, get Awakened PoE Trade, load it up, and then hover over an item, press Control D, and then you can see up here, it'll show total DPS, 118. So let's say we found a different item like this. We can press Control D, 117. That's not an upgrade, but let's see if it had attack speed on top. Well, then maybe it would be an upgrade. Aha, we have found an upgrade. Let's equip that instead, if you can handle the socket pressure. Now, there are certain vendor recipes that you can do in Path of Exile. This is when you sell certain items with other items and you get a specific reward out of it. There is one that is very useful in Path of Exile for attack-based builds, and that is a magic weapon with a single blacksmith's whetstone and then a rustic sash, and you'll get back an item with % physical damage on it. Now, the amount of physical damage you get is determined by the rarity of the rustic sash. So if we use just a normal, you get nothing. If you use a magic, you get tier 8, which is 40 to 49%. If you use a rare rustic sash, you're going to get tier 7, which is even more. And then if you use a unique, you get a higher tier, but that's not something you're probably going to use that much. So don't forget about this one. It will give you a magic item back with an empty suffix, which you can then use to craft on attack speed or something like this. Something like this could be a decent upgrade for your build if you get a good base and just haven't found an essence or something like that. So don't forget about that recipe. Next tip is to use your buffs. There are a lot of attack-based buffs you can use, like Blood Rage. This gives you increased attack speed and damage leech while it's active, and a chance to gain a frenzy charge on kill, which is going to make you attack faster and deal more damage. It does have the downside of it draining your life, but with the inherent leech that it comes with, you should be okay. Make sure you're using your Blood Rage. So you push that button and then we can hit stuff and we'll get a frenzy charge, which gives us more damage, increase attack and cast speed. So you've got your little buffs. Then also things like Herald of Ice. A lot of builds will use these just for increased flat damage, similar to what we crafted on our gear earlier. And then debuffs, things like curses. If you're doing some kind of elemental damage build, you might use elemental weakness or a mark, sniper's mark. These are great against bosses, big single targets. You curse them and it casts a spell on them that makes them weaker, and then you hit them. We can just demonstrate over here. You cast your curse, hit them, makes them take more damage. Now, Most build guides that you're following will suggest a specific curse, but just make sure that you are actually using these buffs and not forgetting about turning on your Blood Rage and actually casting your curse. Next, a lot of attack builds are going to be using this node over here, Precise Technique. 40% more attack damage if accuracy rating is higher than maximum life, never deal critical strikes. Most builds, while leveling, don't worry about critical strikes, and 40% more attack damage is huge. But you do need to keep an eye on your accuracy rating. So if you push C and then head over to your skill, we can just look at my default attack. We can see what is my accuracy rating, 482. My life is 968. So if I got Precise Technique, I wouldn't be getting that 40% more attack damage. If you want to get more accuracy on the tree, there are plenty of these accuracy wheels bouncing around the tree over here, over here, over here. You can also find it on gems like Precision, which is an aura, and you can craft it as a suffix on various pieces of gear. So Precise Technique, if you are playing a build that recommends using this, just make sure to keep an eye on your accuracy to make sure you're getting that 40% more damage benefit from it. Another great buff for attack-based builds are things like Onslaught. Onslaught grants 20% increased attack cost and movement speed. Various builds will be able to acquire this in different ways. On my build, for example, we grab this wheel over here, which gives us a chance to get Onslaught on kill. Other builds, check out what is recommended. You can also get it from a silver flask. I think you get one of those in Act 10. You can use that to get Onslaught, but it's a very nice buff for your attack-based builds. So let's have a look at some defensive things you can do for your build that will make it so that you're not dying as much. One thing you can do is, again, use the crafting bench to craft on resistances onto your gear. Resistances are suffixes. So if you have, for example, an empty suffix on your helmet, you can craft on something like this. Ideally, you want to have 75 of each of your fire, cold, and lightning resistance throughout the campaign. So keep an eye on that. It really is important in Path of Exile, and it's not too hard with access to the crafting bench. Also, bandit rewards like Alira granting 15% increase all elemental resistances, and then also certain auras like Purity of Elements will help you reach that 75%. But it is very important that you get that resistance cap. This next tip is so important for newer players. I've seen so many POBs where players clearly just do not take their flasks seriously. Flasks are as important as any other piece of gear. Don't look at these as some little extra bonus. Treat your flasks with the same respect you would treat your weapon. Make sure that you're upgrading your life flask when you can. In the campaign, every 6-ish levels early on, you'll be finding a new tier of life flask. Then it eventually spaces out, and eventually you'll start finding divine life flasks in about Act 9, around level 60. This is going to be your endgame flask, but on top of that, what you want to do is keep a lookout for things like a granite flask. Granite flasks are really powerful during the campaign because it gives you a nice flat chunk of armor. Same with evasion, gives you a nice bit of evasion rating. These are very nice and defensive. During the campaign, you can also just hit them with an Orb of Transmutation, something like that. Maybe you get lucky with immunity to corrupted blood and bleeding, or maybe you get something like this with increased charges, or if you get very lucky, you might get something like increased armor during effect. Something like this is very nice. And then just make sure you are using your flask, but do not neglect your flasks. A great mod on your life flask, don't waste too many alterations trying to get it early on, is instant recovery when on low life, but not instant recovery. So this is a common bait for newer players. I'll say make sure you have instant recovery on your flask. They will get this mod. 66% reduced amount recovered, instant recovery. This is bad. We do not want this one. Let me show you the one we do want. The one we do want is instant recovery when on low life. The other mod doesn't grant you as much life, less than half, whereas this still grants you a good amount of life and instant recovery when on low life. So when you dip below 50%, you use this and all of that life is applied to you instantly instead of over 3.5 seconds. If you get something like this, you can use an Orb of Augmentation to try and get a lucky suffix, but you can also head over to the Menagerie. Here, this is Einhar. You will meet him in Act 2, and over at the Beast Crafting Station, here you will find some nice crafts that he can do for you. So let's say we get instant recovery like this, we pop that in, and down here, he will be able to craft on some nice stuff for us, like here, add a mod to a life or mana flask. Of Convection, immunity to freeze and chill. This is a great one. Shock, ignite are annoying, but I would prioritize something like this. Immunity to bleeding and corrupted blood. These are very deadly during the campaign. So try get something with like instant recovery, then head over to the Menagerie and use these recipes to craft on either freeze immunity or bleeding immunity. The other ones are also great, but less useful early on. Upgrade your flasks. Please, 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 please upgrade your flasks. From Act 6 onwards, you're going to be killing gods because this is Path of Exile, and you're going to get these Pantheon rewards. These are really important, so don't forget to allocate them. Soul of the Brine King on attack builds is great early because you get cannot be stunned if you've been stunned in the last 2 seconds. Getting stun locked is usually a death sentence, especially if you're close quarters. It's not going to feel great. The other ones are also pretty nice, but I usually take Soul of the Brine King early. The other ones are also nice. I often go with Soul of Ralakesh. Moving while bleeding doesn't cause you to take extra damage. So often you'll get bleeding applied to you, and then you'll try and run away, and then you just die even faster. With Soul of Ralakesh, you can allocate that, and you won't take as much damage. These other ones, have a look. Most build guides will suggest which one to take, but these are often my top picks for the campaign. Very important, make sure you do your lab during the campaign. Don't wait until you finish the campaign before you do all your trials and then do your lab. Ascending is a huge power spike. So learn where these different trials are, do them, and then do your labs. It's so important. It's often so much damage or so many defenses that you're getting out of this. So do not neglect it. Also, there are plenty of quests throughout the campaign that grant various skill points and respec points. Do those. I can show you a list over here of which ones there are. Make sure you are doing these, because if you're not, well, you're going to be ending the campaign with far fewer points than you otherwise could be. So looking at my little spreadsheet for my builds, which you should be playing over here on the right, I've put in where you get these skill points, which quests you get these. So it shows you, you do this quest, you get a skill point. You do this, you get a skill point, shows you where the trials are, which quests you need to do here. But there are, I think, about 20 skill points that you get during the campaign, maybe something like that. 20, 24, yes, 24 during the campaign that you get. So make sure you're doing that. 24 points is huge. Make sure you're doing that. And the final tip, there is no shame in using the trade site to find upgrades while you are playing in a trade league. That's what it is there for. If you're trying to find the perfect pair of boots, you just need like 50 fire res, 30 cold res. You can search for that. So you can type in the league you do, and then you can type in, I want a boot, and I want movement speed. I have a different guide on the trade site, which you can check out. You can say, I want cold res, and then you can search for the item, find exactly what you need. And often it's going to be much cheaper than trying to craft it yourself or make it yourself in another way. So use the trade site if you're playing a trade league to find your next big upgrade. That is going to be it for this video. Let me know what you're going to be league starting. Tonight, I will be live on stream for league start. If you're playing my build, let me know. Join the Discord. Let us give you a hand. And if you've got any other tips that you thought I might have missed, also leave it down in the comments and I will be sure to include them. Maybe we can do a second version of this video. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful league start. I will catch you on Twitch. Take care. Bye-bye.